Ever find yourself just staring at your phone like HLW? How is it even possible to send like cat memes and stuff across the air? Like what even is information?
Yeah, it's kind of a weird thing to think about, right? It's like we don't even think about that question until we live in the digital age. But luckily for us, back in 1948, this guy Claude Shannon, he kind of wrote the code book to the information age.
Okay, so a mathematical theory of communication, not exactly a light read, I gotta say,
Yeah.
just based on the title alone, but it's that important.
Oh, it's huge GE. Like the stuff we just take for granted that spins directly out of this paper, you wouldn't believe it. But the cool thing is he starts simple, deceptively simple, you know? He just asks, what as information? But the answer, man, it's way deeper than you'd think.
Okay, all right, I'm intrigued. What's the Shannon definition then?
So he realized it's not about what the message means, like the actual content. It's about the choice it represents. Out of all the possible things you could say, what did you pick? That's the core of information right there.
Okay, hold on. I need an example. I'm very much an example person.
All right, picture a coin flip, right? Heads or tails. The information isn't heads or tails themselves. It's that you had this 50-50 choice, and you're communicating which one happened.
So it's not the thing being chosen, it's the fact that a choice was made at all.
Bingo! And that is how we get to the mighty bit, one choice between two equally likely things, like that coin flip. Or think of a light switch, on or off, same deal.
Light switch, on or off. Okay, I got that. Super simple. But wait, we're talking about like the entire internet built on this.
Yeah.
How do we jump from light switches to cat memes here?
Because what Shannon did was he showed how everything digital, all the complex stuff, it all boils down to those on or off choices, those bits. It's the language of computers. And he basically wrote the dictionary.
That's kind of mind-blowing, not gonna lie. But human language, that's not just random bits like a coin flip, right? We've got like patterns, grammar, the whole 9 yards.
You're telling me. And Shannon was way ahead of you there. He brings in this idea of entropy to measure how unpredictable a source of information actually is.
Entropy, like from physics class. Like things always tend towards disorder. Is that what we're talking about?
Same basic idea, but applied to information. Okay, so think of it this way. If you see the letter Q in English, what's the next letter going to be, most likely?
You.
Mm.
Unless we're getting really creative with our spelling.
Exactly. So that's low entropy, right? It's predictable. Shannon figured out how to actually calculate this for any language, not just English.
Well, hold on. So he could measure like how much actual information is packed into the English language itself.
He could, and he went even further. He actually made these approximations of English text based on how often letters appear, then pairs of letters, then groups of three.
Wait, fake English? Is that what you're saying? He made like a bot or something back in 1948.
Sort of. And the results are wild. You can actually see the gibberish get more and more English-like as you add more of those patterns, those rules.
Okay, now I have to see these Shannonisms later. You got to show me those. Speaking of things getting messy, in the real world, communication is not perfect, right? There's noise? What about that?
Noise, the eternal enemy of a good message. And Shannon, he doesn't shy away from that. He dives right in. And you know what he found?
Okay, lay it on me. Is there some secret to like perfect noise-free communication?
Wouldn't that be amazing? Sadly, no. He proved you can never fully get rid of noise.
Oh, man. There goes my dream of emails always sending perfectly on the first try.
Huh? Tell me about it. But hey, don't lose hope just yet. Shannon figured out ways to work around the noise, like how to code messages so they're more resilient even if there's interference.
Okay, so coding for clarity. I'm listening. How do we do that?
Imagine like shouting a message across a crowded room, right? Instead of just yelling at once really loud, you might say it a few times, maybe use some hand gestures or even like write it down.
Ah, redundancy. You're basically building in backup. So even if part of the message gets lost, the main idea still makes it through.
Right on. And the amazing thing is, Shannon's math could actually show how much redundancy you needed to counter different levels of noise.
So it's not just like throwing extra words at the problem. It's like strategic redundancy,
Yeah.
like a communication ninja or something.
You got it. And you want to know something really cool? English itself is already full of this kind of built-in redundancy.
Yeah, really?
Oh, yeah. Remember how we were talking about how predictable it is? Well, Shannon figured out that like half of the English language is basically redundant.
Are you serious? We're using twice as many letters as we need to. That seems kind of inefficient.
Well, yeah, maybe a little. But that redundancy, it also makes spoken language super robust. Think about it. You can miss a word or two and still get the gist of the sentence.
It's like our brains are already running Shannon's noise-canceling code without even knowing it.
Exactly. And it really drives home this point. Redundancy isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes a little repetition is just what you need to make sure your message gets through.
Okay, mind officially blown. Claude Shannon teaching us to embrace redundancy. But even with, like, the best coding tricks, don't we eventually hit the limits of what's physically possible?
You're thinking about bandwidth, power, that kind of thing.
Yeah, because, I mean, you can have the best noise-canceling code in the world, but if you're trying to cram, like, a terabyte of data through a dial-up modem, good luck with that.
Exactly. And that is where we get to one of Shannon's most important contributions, the concept of channel capacity. Basically, think of it like a speed limit, but for information.
Okay, so every way of communicating, whether it's a phone line, fiber optic cable, even just like shouting across a room, they all have a maximum amount of information they can handle at once.
Exactly. And get this, Shannon gave us the equations to actually calculate that limit for any given channel.
Hold on. He could mathematically define like the absolute limit of how much information you could squeeze through a given pipeline.
He sure could. And those equations, we still use them today. Designing everything from cell phone networks to the internet, it all goes back to that.
So when we see like data rates plateauing, even as technology supposedly gets better, we might just be bumping up against good old Shannon's limit.
It happens. It's a fundamental truth about communication. And it's not just about zeros and ones either. It applies to continuous signals too, like voice or music.
Okay, now my head's really spinning. Continuous signals, that's a whole other can of worms. How do you even measure how much information is in a sound wave?
Now, that's where things get really interesting. With continuous signals, we're not talking about a fixed number of possibilities like we do with letters or bits. It's more like an infinite range of values, amplitude, frequency, all that good stuff.
Infinite. Whoa, okay, my brain just blue screened a little. How do you even start to measure infinity?
Well, that's where Shannon's genius really shines. He shifted the focus from trying to make a perfect copy to the idea of fidelity.
Fidelity, like how true the sound is to the original recording.
You got it. Shannon introduced this idea of a fidelity evaluation function. It basically measures how much we care if the received signal isn't exactly the same as the one that was sent.
So it's all about defining like what good enough actually means. Because sometimes a perfect copy isn't what you need, right? It just needs to be close enough.
Right.
Like we're okay with a little fuzz on a phone call, but if I'm like listening to a symphony or something, I probably want that high fidelity, right?
Totally. And how strict that good enough needs to be, it all depends, right? It's a trade-off. Accuracy versus, like, practicality.
Like, is it more important for the music to sound exactly like the original recording or just, good enough that I don't have to think about the compression algorithm every 5 seconds?
And that's the thing. Shannon gave us the tools to actually think about those trade-offs precisely, to measure that good enough and build systems that make sense.
Okay, before my brain totally melts down here, remind me again. When did Shannon do all of this? Like, what year are we talking about?
So his big paper, the one we're talking about, it came out in 1948.
1948.
Yeah.
Seriously, that's like the Stone Age of computers. It's kind of wild how much of this stuff still matters today.
Isn't it crazy? Like, yeah, we've got way faster computers now, fancier gadgets, all that. But the fundamentals, the way we think about information, measure it, send it, it all goes back to Shannon.
And it's not just that he had these ideas, it's that he figured out how to actually calculate the limits of communication.
Yeah.
Like, he mathematically proved what was possible, what wasn't.
Exactly. He wasn't just like guessing or speculating. And the best part is, he showed us that those limits weren't just theoretical, you could actually reach them.
Wait, so we're not just stuck with whatever bandwidth or noise we happen to have. We can actually get closer to that maximum if we're smart about it.
That's the thing about Shannon. He didn't just point out the problem. He pointed to the solution. He showed us that with the right kind of coding, we could squeeze out every last bit of efficiency. You know?
Okay, so like real-world examples here. This is why we have MP3s and stuff, right? We've basically squished music down to a fraction of its original size, but without losing too much fidelity in the process.
Exactly. And it's not just about making files smaller either. It's what lets us stream movies, have those clear video calls, all those things we kind of take for granted.
So next time Netflix doesn't buffer, I can thank Claude Shannon for that.
You got it. And the next time you send a text, remember, it all comes back to those little bits, those choices. That's Shannon's legacy.
It's pretty wild when you think about it.
Right.
This idea of measuring information, it seems so, I don't know, abstract. but it's had this huge impact on our lives.
It really goes to show sometimes the biggest changes start with someone just asking the right question. In this case, what is information?
And luckily for us, Claude Shannon was there to answer it. So, to everyone listening, next time you see some paper all full of equations and stuff, don't judge it too quickly. You never know what world-changing ideas might be hiding in there.
And never underestimate the power of a good question.
That's a wrap on our deep dive into the mind of Claude Shannon. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep those bigs flowing.